Revenge with Marvella. Chloe's smirk was the worst part. She stood in that courtroom like she owned it, her perfectly manicured hand resting on the witness stand. The judge looked at me with something close to pity, and I felt my stomach drop. "Your Honor," Chloe said, her voice dripping with false concern. She can't even remember her own social security number anymore. She paused for effect, letting her words sink into every corner of the room. "Just yesterday, I had to remind her 3 times what year it was." The judge wrote something down, and I watched my life slipping away with each stroke of his pen. My son, Mark, sat behind Chloe, his eyes fixed on the floor. He wouldn't look at me. That hurt more than anything Chloe could say. I wanted to scream that I remembered everything, every detail, every lie, every stolen dollar. But my lawyer had told me to stay quiet, to let him handle it. So I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, wearing my oldest cardigan and my reading glasses, looking exactly like the confused old woman Chloe wanted everyone to see. It started 6 months ago on what should have been a peaceful Tuesday. I was watering my roses when Chloe's car pulled into my driveway. She climbed out with an overnight bag and a concerned expression I now recognized as completely fake. "Mom," she said, using that sweet voice that made my skin crawl, "we need to talk about the stove." I was confused. "What about the stove?" She explained that I had left it on 3 times that week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. She had proof, she said, from the smart home system Mark had installed for my birthday. I didn't remember leaving it on once, but Chloe seemed so certain. She suggested, very gently, that maybe she should stay for a few days. Just to help out. Just to make sure I was safe. I said yes, because what kind of person argues when someone offers help? By that weekend, her clothes were in my guest room. By the following Tuesday, she had changed the locks. She told me it was for security. I believed her then. The first real alarm bell came 2 weeks after Chloe moved in. I tried to check my bank account online, something I did every Monday morning with my coffee. But my password didn't work. I tried 3 times, carefully typing each letter, but the screen kept telling me I was wrong. Then came the security questions. "What was your first pet's name?" the screen asked. I typed buttons, the name of my childhood cat. Wrong. "What street did you grow up on?" I typed Maple Street. Wrong again. I felt panic rising in my chest. These were my accounts, my memories, my life. When I asked Chloe about it, she smiled that sweet smile and said the bank must have updated their system. "Don't worry," she said, patting my hand like I was 5 years old. "I'll handle it for you. You shouldn't have to stress about these things at your age." She took my laptop and disappeared into the guest room for an hour. When she came back, she said everything was fixed, but she had changed the passwords to something more secure. She would handle my banking from now on. A week later, Chloe introduced me to Vincent Cooper. He was tall, wore expensive suits, and had the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Mom, this is our new family lawyer," Chloe announced over dinner. "Vincent specializes in elder care and estate planning. I thought it would be good for us to have everything organized, just in case." "Just in case of what?" I wanted to ask, but Vincent was already shaking my hand, talking about trusts and power of attorney and medical directives. My head spun with legal terms I barely understood. Chloe nodded along like she had been studying law her entire life. It was only later, when I was lying in bed unable to sleep, that I remembered something. Years ago, Mark had mentioned that Chloe went to college in Boston. Vincent had a Red Sox pennant in his office. The next morning, I searched his name online and found his college alumni page. He and Chloe had graduated the same year from the same university. They were friends. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a plan. The house staff changed next. My housekeeper, Paula, had been with me for 15 years. She knew how I liked my tea, where I kept my gardening tools, and every story about my late husband, Henry. Then one Monday, Paula wasn't there. Instead, a young woman named Tracy stood in my kitchen, unpacking cleaning supplies. "Where's Paula?" I asked Chloe. "Oh, Paula decided to retire," Chloe said without looking up from her phone. "I found Tracy through an agency. She comes highly recommended." Tracy was polite but distant. She never asked about my day or shared stories about her own life. She just cleaned and left. The same thing happened with my gardener, my handyman, and even the teenager who mowed my lawn. One by one, the familiar faces disappeared, replaced by Chloe's choices. People who smiled but never really talked to me. People who took their instructions from Chloe, not from me. I realized with growing horror that I had become a stranger in my own home. These new people didn't know me, didn't care about me. They worked for Chloe. I was just the old woman who lived there. I needed an escape, somewhere Chloe couldn't follow me with her fake smiles and watching eyes. My sewing room became that place. It was at the back of the house, full of fabrics and threads and half-finished quilts. Chloe never came in there. She said the clutter gave her anxiety. One afternoon, while organizing my quilting cabinet, my hand brushed against something odd. The bottom drawer felt too shallow. I pressed on the wood and a false bottom popped up. Inside was Henry's old laptop, the one I thought he had thrown away years ago. My hands shook as I pulled it out. Why had Henry hidden it? What was on here that he wanted to keep secret? The laptop was password protected, but I knew Henry. I tried his mother's birthday and the screen unlocked. What I found made my heart race. Files. Dozens of files about investments, offshore accounts, and security protocols. Henry had been preparing for something. He had been protecting our assets from something he saw coming. He just hadn't lived long enough to warn me about Chloe. The files on Henry's laptop were organized by year. I started with the most recent ones, dated just months before he passed away. My eyes blurred as I read through spreadsheets and bank statements. Then I saw it, a monthly withdrawal from my retirement fund. $5,000 every month for the past 6 months, going to something labeled Private Settlement Agreement. I had never heard of any settlement. I had never signed anything. With shaking hands, I cross-referenced the dates with my banking app, the one Chloe now controlled. The withdrawals were there, but they were labeled differently in my account. Charitable donations, they said. Medical expenses. All lies. Chloe had been stealing from me systematically, carefully, using legal-sounding terms to hide what she was really doing. The total made me feel sick. $30,000. Gone. And that was just one account. How many others had she touched? How much had she really taken while I trusted her, while I let her help me? I heard them through the heating vent. My bedroom was directly above the living room, and voices carried up through the old house's metal ducts. Chloe was on the phone, and she wasn't using her sweet voice anymore. Look, I need you to write that she shows signs of moderate cognitive decline, she said. Memory issues, confusion, difficulty with basic tasks. There was a pause. Yes, I know you haven't done a full evaluation yet. That's why I'm calling. When you see her next week, just ask the right questions, okay? She'll mess up. She always does when she's nervous. My blood turned cold. She was coaching a doctor. She was literally telling someone how to diagnose me. And make sure you mention the stove incident, Chloe continued. And that time she forgot Mark's birthday. We need documentation that shows a pattern. I lay in bed, my phone recording everything through the vent. I had started recording everything 2 days ago, after I found Henry's laptop. Some instinct told me I would need proof. Now I knew I was right. Chloe wasn't just stealing my money. She was trying to steal my mind, my credibility, my entire identity. Mark came to visit on a Sunday. He brought flowers, which he never did, and his smile was tight and uncomfortable. We sat in the living room while Chloe made tea in the kitchen, and I tried to talk to him about what was happening. Mark, honey, I need to tell you something about Chloe. Mom, stop. He held up his hand, cutting me off. I know what you're going to say, and I need you to listen. This is for your own safety. Those words hit me like a punch. What? The stove incidents, the confusion with your accounts, forgetting my birthday, Chloe's been keeping track. We're worried about you. My own son. My baby boy who I raised, who I sacrificed for, who I sent to college and helped through every crisis in his life. He was looking at me like I was the problem. She's lying, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She's manipulating you. Mom, please. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Chloe loves you. We both do. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. He had been brainwashed. Completely. Chloe had wrapped him so tightly around her finger that he couldn't see the truth even when his own mother was trying to show it to him. That night, I stopped crying. Tears wouldn't fix this. Anger wouldn't fix this. I needed to be smarter than Chloe, more careful, more thorough. I needed to beat her at her own game. I opened a new spreadsheet on Henry's laptop and titled it The Hunt. I would find every transaction, every forged signature, every lie. I would build a case so strong that no judge could ignore it, no lawyer could twist it, and no son could deny it. The first column was dates. The second was amounts. The third was Chloe's explanations versus the truth. I worked methodically, checking every account I could still access through Henry's old files. He had been smart enough to keep backup records of everything, and I blessed him for it. By dawn, I had found 17 suspicious transactions. By the end of the week, I had found 43. Chloe had been stealing from me for almost a year, even before she moved in. She had been planning this for longer than I realized. But I was planning now too. And I had something she didn't have: the truth. My sewing room became my war room. Every night after Chloe went to bed, I crept downstairs with Henry's laptop and worked by the small desk lamp. The laptop files showed something I hadn't expected: offshore accounts. Henry had set up several accounts in the Cayman Islands years ago, legitimate investments that were completely legal. But Chloe had found them. I traced wire transfers from those accounts to new accounts in Chloe's name. She hadn't just stolen from my American banks. She had found Henry's offshore investments and systematically drained them. The amounts were staggering. Over 6 months, she had transferred nearly $200,000. The transfers were clever, broken into small amounts that wouldn't trigger automatic alerts. But they left a trail. A clear, undeniable trail from my accounts to hers. I downloaded every statement, saved every confirmation number. I cross-referenced the dates with Chloe's own calendar, which she kept on the shared family app. On the days she made transfers, she had alibis, grocery shopping, doctor's appointments, lunch with friends. She had been covering her tracks. But digital trails never truly disappear. Finding Chloe's office was easier than I expected. It was Henry's old library, the room where he used to read his mystery novels and smoke his pipe. Chloe had converted it into her home office, complete with a lock on the door that she thought I didn't notice. But I had keys to every room in this house. I had lived here for 40 years. One afternoon when Chloe went to get her nails done, I used my key. The office was immaculate, too immaculate. Everything was labeled and filed with obsessive precision. I found what I was looking for in a filing cabinet marked property documents. Inside were the deeds to my house, my vacation cabin, and Henry's old workshop downtown. Except these weren't the original deeds. These were new copies, dated within the last 3 months. And the signatures were wrong. I pulled out my phone and compared them to my real signature on my driver's license. Close, but not quite right. The capital letters were too looped. The final stroke was too short. Chloe had forged these documents. She had literally forged my signature to transfer my properties into her name. I photographed everything, my hands steady despite my racing heart. The break came from an unexpected source. I was reading the business section of the newspaper one morning when I saw an article about Chloe's company. The CEO, Anthony Pierce, had announced an internal audit after financial irregularities were discovered. The article was vague, but it mentioned that the company was cooperating with investigators. I remembered that Chloe worked in the accounting department. An idea formed in my mind. What if Chloe's theft hadn't stopped with me? What if she was stealing from her employer too? I found Anthony Pierce's email on the company website and spent 2 hours crafting a careful, professional message. I didn't accuse Chloe directly. I simply mentioned that I had noticed some concerning financial patterns and wondered if they might be related to the company's audit. I included just enough detail to sound credible, but not enough to reveal my full hand. 3 days later, I got a reply. Mr. Pierce wanted to meet. He was looking for a reason to fire Chloe, he said carefully. If I had information, he was very interested in hearing it. I needed to keep Chloe distracted while I finished my investigation. The plan came to me while I was sorting through old family photos. I mentioned casually over breakfast that Henry had always talked about a hidden safe in the house. A safe. Chloe's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. What's in it? Oh, I don't remember exactly, I said, playing the confused old woman she expected me to be. Important documents, I think. Maybe some jewelry. Henry was always so secretive about it. I watched her mind work. She was calculating, wondering if there was more money to steal. Where is it? She asked, trying to sound casual. That's the problem, I sighed. I can't remember. Somewhere in the basement, maybe? Or the attic. For the next 4 weeks, Chloe tore the house apart looking for that safe. She spent entire weekends in the basement with a hammer and crowbar, tapping on walls and moving old furniture. She hired a contractor to check the attic for hidden spaces. She even called a locksmith to ask about antique safes. I watched her obsession grow, knowing every hour she wasted hunting for a safe that didn't exist was an hour I could use to finish my audit. I made the safe real on a Tuesday night. While Chloe was at her book club, which I was no longer invited to, I took an old lockbox from the garage and set it up in the basement, behind a loose panel I had intentionally left obvious. Inside the box, I placed a mirror and a note written in my neatest handwriting, "Watch your back." I knew Chloe had been checking the basement obsessively, so it would only be a matter of time before she found it. She discovered it that weekend. I heard her excited footsteps running up from the basement, heard her struggling with the lock. Then silence. Long, heavy silence. When she came upstairs, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Find what you were looking for?" I asked innocently. She stared at me, really stared at me, for the first time in months. For just a moment, she saw me clearly, not as a confused old woman, but as someone who knew exactly what was happening. "That wasn't funny," she said quietly. "I don't know what you mean," I replied, turning back to my crossword puzzle. But we both knew. The game had changed. She knew I was onto her, and now she would either back off or double down. I was betting on double down. I sent the email from a cafe across town, using a temporary email address I had created just for this purpose. The subject line read, "Confidential information regarding employee misconduct." The body was brief. Check transfer records from account 847392 during March and April. Follow the trail to Cayman accounts. Your audit will find what you're looking for. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I had included just enough detail that Anthony Pierce's auditors would know exactly where to look. 2 days later, Chloe came home early from work. Her face was flushed, and she was on her phone, arguing with someone in a hushed, desperate voice. "I don't know how they found out," she hissed. "No, I covered everything. The accounts were clean." She hung up and immediately started making another call. I watched from the kitchen, pretending to arrange flowers. Over the next week, Chloe made a massive mistake. In her panic to cover her tracks at work, she made a large transfer from my retirement account to her offshore account, $50,000 in one transaction. It was too much, too fast, too obvious. And it was exactly what I needed. The transaction triggered an automatic fraud alert at my bank. For the first time in months, they contacted me directly, not through Chloe. I dressed carefully for the court hearing. My oldest cardigan, the one with pills on the sleeves. My comfortable shoes that were worn at the heels. Reading glasses on a chain around my neck. I even messed up my hair a little before leaving the house. Chloe smiled when she saw me. She thought she had already won. In the car on the way to the courthouse, she patted my hand and spoke to me like I was a child. "Just let Vincent do the talking, okay, Mom? Don't try to answer any questions yourself. We don't want you to get confused and say something wrong." I nodded meekly. Let her think I was beaten. Let her think she had succeeded. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Mark sat behind Chloe, still refusing to meet my eyes. My lawyer, Mrs. Brennan, had been carefully chosen. She was young, sharp, and most importantly, she believed me. She had reviewed every piece of evidence I had collected and had actually smiled. "This is ironclad," she had said. But she had also warned me, "You need to let Chloe hang herself first. Let her present her case. Let her lie. Then we'll show the judge the truth." So I sat there, looking frail and confused, while Chloe prepared to destroy me. Vincent Cooper stood up first. He was confident, professional, every inch the successful lawyer. Your Honor, we're here today because my client, Chloe Anderson, has been trying to protect her mother-in-law from herself. He laid out his case with practiced ease. He showed medical reports from the doctor. Chloe had coached reports that claimed I had moderate cognitive decline. He presented a video of me looking lost in a grocery store, asking the clerk where the milk was. Except I knew that video had been edited. The full footage showed me asking where the milk was located in that specific store, not because I didn't know what milk was. Chloe had cut the video to make me look confused. Vincent showed bank statements with my charitable donations and medical expenses, suggesting I couldn't manage my own finances. He even brought out the smart home data, showing 3 times the stove had been left on all within 1 week. Each piece of evidence built on the last. By the time Vincent finished, I could see the judge's expression. He felt sorry for me. He thought I was a confused old woman who needed help. Chloe sat at her table, that small smile on her face, texting someone. The judge looked tired. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at the clock. We're going to take a 15-minute recess, he announced. When we return, I'll hear from Mrs. Anderson's counsel. Chloe practically glowed. She turned to Vincent, and they high-fived quietly, like they were already celebrating. She pulled out her phone and started texting rapidly. I caught a glimpse of her screen. She was messaging her real estate agent. Start paperwork on the vacation cabin, the message read. She was already planning to sell my properties. Already counting money she thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming. Those 15 minutes felt like hours. I sat in my chair, my hands folded, watching Chloe. She didn't look at me once. She was too busy planning her victory. Mark finally glanced my way, and I saw something in his expression: doubt, maybe, or guilt. But he didn't say anything. Mrs. Brennan leaned over and whispered, "Are you ready?" I nodded. The judge's door was still closed. In those final moments of recess, I pulled out my phone and pressed send on 3 emails I had prepared the night before. The emails went to 3 recipients: Judge Harrison, Anthony Pierce, and District Attorney Maxwell Stone. Each email contained a different attachment. For Judge Harrison, I sent the complete audit I had spent weeks compiling. Every forged signature, every suspicious transfer, every lie Chloe had told, all organized into a clear, devastating timeline. For Anthony Pierce, I sent the evidence of Chloe's embezzlement from his company, cross-referenced with the personal theft she had committed against me. The patterns were identical. For the district attorney, I sent everything: the recordings of Chloe coaching the doctor, the forged deeds, the offshore transfers, the lot. Each email had the same subject line: elder abuse and financial fraud, time sensitive. I watched my phone. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. Then I saw the judge's assistant rush into his chambers with a tablet. I saw Anthony Pierce, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, suddenly lean forward and start making phone calls. I saw a woman in a dark suit enter the courtroom and take a seat near the door. She had a badge clipped to her belt. Everything was in motion now. The 15 minutes were up. The judge returned. Judge Harrison walked back into the courtroom, and his entire demeanor had changed. The tired, sympathetic expression was gone. Now he looked alert, focused, and very, very serious. He sat down and looked directly at Chloe. Mrs. Anderson, please stand. Chloe stood, smoothing her skirt, still wearing that confident smile. She thought he was about to rule in her favor. Mrs. Anderson, I have just been made aware of some very disturbing evidence that was submitted during this recess, the judge said slowly. Evidence that contradicts everything your attorney has presented today. Chloe's smile flickered. Your Honor, I don't understand. You are accused of elder abuse, financial exploitation, forgery, and embezzlement, Judge Harrison continued. I am suspending these proceedings immediately pending a criminal investigation. The courtroom erupted. Vincent jumped to his feet, objecting. Mark gasped. Mrs. Brennan remained perfectly calm, her hands folded on the table. And Chloe's face went white. She turned and looked at me for the first time all day. Really looked at me. And she saw, finally, that I wasn't confused at all. That I had never been confused. That I had been hunting her the entire time. The courtroom doors opened. Anthony Pierce walked in first, his face grim and professional. Behind him came 2 police officers. And behind them came a man in a suit carrying a folder thick with documents. "Chloe Anderson," one of the officers said. "You're under arrest." "What?" "No, this is..." Chloe turned to Vincent, but he was backing away, his hands up. He wasn't going down with her. The officer began reading her rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The charges are embezzlement from Pierce Financial Corporation, forgery of legal documents, elder abuse, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult," Anthony Pierce added. "We have complete documentation of transfers from company accounts to your offshore accounts. We also have evidence that you systematically defrauded your mother-in-law." The handcuffs clicked onto Chloe's wrists. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. She looked at Mark, her eyes pleading. "Mark, tell them. Tell them I was helping her. Tell them I was protecting her." But Mark wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at the folder Mrs. Brennan had just handed him, the same folder I had given her last week. The one with every piece of evidence I had collected. Mark's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. Bank statements showing the stolen money. Photos of the forged deeds. Transcripts of the recorded conversation where Chloe coached the doctor. Copies of the offshore account transfers. Page after page of undeniable proof. His face went from confused to shocked to devastated. "Mom," he whispered, looking at me with tears in his eyes. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I wanted to comfort him. He was still my son. But I also needed him to understand what had happened. What he had allowed to happen. "You didn't know because you didn't want to know," I said quietly. "You chose to believe her instead of me." "Mrs. Anderson," one of the officers said to Chloe, "you need to come with us now." "This is insane," Chloe screamed. She was crying now, her perfect makeup running down her face. "She's lying. She's the one who can't remember anything. She's confused. The evidence says otherwise," Judge Harrison said coldly. "And there's a lot of it." As the officers led Chloe toward the door, she turned back one last time. Her eyes found mine, and all the sweetness was gone. Only hatred remained. "You've ruined my life," she spat. "You destroyed everything." I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 66 years. But I stood straight, and I looked Chloe right in the eyes. "I didn't ruin your life, Chloe. I didn't destroy anything." I walked closer to her, aware that everyone in the courtroom was watching. "You did this to yourself. Every forged signature, every stolen dollar, every lie you told, those were your choices. Not mine." "I was helping you," she insisted, but her voice was weak now. "No," I said firmly. "You were stealing from me. You were manipulating my son. You were trying to take everything I worked for, everything Henry and I built together. But the worst part? You tried to make me believe I was crazy. You tried to steal my mind, my identity, my dignity." I paused, making sure she heard every word. "I didn't ruin you, Chloe. I simply showed the world what you had already done to yourself. All I did was tell the truth." The officers led her out. The courtroom door closed behind her, and the sound felt final. Mark was still sitting there, holding the folder, tears streaming down his face. Anthony Pierce shook Mrs. Brennan's hand and left. Judge Harrison cleared his throat and said he would review the case further before making any rulings about my assets. 3 weeks later, I sat at my kitchen table, my table, in my house, drinking my tea. All the new locks had been changed back. Paula was in the living room, dusting and humming the way she always did. My real gardener was outside planting new roses. The house felt like mine again. Mrs. Brennan had helped me set up a new trust, one with so many legal protections that Chloe could never touch it, even if she somehow got out of prison early. The prosecutor said she was looking at minimum 5 years, possibly 10 with all the charges combined. Mark had apologized 17 times. I had forgiven him once, but I told him we needed time. He needed to understand what he had let happen, what his blind trust had nearly cost me. He agreed, moving back to his own apartment, going to therapy. Maybe we would rebuild our relationship. Maybe not. Henry's old laptop sat on the table in front of me. I touched the worn keyboard and smiled. You knew, I whispered to him. Somehow, you knew I would need this. At 66, I had learned something important. Age doesn't mean weakness, and kindness doesn't mean blindness. I was still here. I was still strong. And I was just getting started.